it was so difficult that I had to turn to some other form of coping. I had to realize that this isn't just my physical world falling apart. Something bigger is happening. Hello, beautiful friends, and welcome back to my channel. It's been 2 weeks since I've recorded, and that's because Moogie got out last week. Well, I mean, those of you who follow me know that she's leash trained, but she got off of her leash and just disappeared for 4 days. Completely unlike her. So I needed a little bit of time to find my baby and get my head back on straight before I could come back. And actually, that whole ordeal was the inspiration for today's video. Today, I want to talk about the dark night of the soul, the different ways that it can manifest, how you can end up in the dark night of the soul without even trying, how you can actually ignore the fact that you're in the dark night of the soul before it gets to the point where you can't anymore, and how, if you do find yourself in this place, you can either ride it out or get out of it without going completely crazy. First of all, what is a dark night of the soul? A dark night of the soul is any period of time in your life that you are purging so much of your shadow self, so much of your shadow aspect, that you feel like your entire world is being flipped upside down. And it could very well be flipped upside down in the process. It just depends on how it manifests for you. Now, on a more gentler level, a dark night of the soul might simply be a period in time where somebody has initiated some form of spiritual awakening, and so they go through all these dark visions and depressing moments, just in a very metaphysical and spiritual sense. They're going through these gut-wrenching moments, these awful memories resurface. They might actually, I've heard of people seeing aliens and angels and all kinds of wild apparitions. Basically, in that sense, a dark night of the soul is any time in your life in which you are forced to question what you already believe about the world. Now, a dark night of the soul can also take a more physical manifestation, and this is generally if you're ready for a dark night of the soul. God or the universe or source or whatever you want to call it has decided that you're ready for the dark night of the soul, but you haven't quite keyed into that yet. And that's when things can get really tricky. This is when you might get really sick all of a sudden, because the shadow aspects that you've been trying to suppress are suddenly manifesting in the physical and making your body sick. You might lose a lot of money. You might lose your home. You might lose a family member. Something bad could really happen. And the weird thing about that is that people don't even tend to realize that's the beginning of the dark night of the soul for them until things start to add up. So maybe you lose a bunch of money and then your health starts failing. A lot of people cope by using some kind of substance, and you can't even do that anymore. And basically everything starts turning and flipping so far upside down that you have no choice but to turn to spirituality. And that's the point when you realize you are in the dark night of the soul all along, and the only choice you have is to come back to source and find an inner peace. So that's kind of how the dark night of the soul manifests for different people. Like I said, you can certainly ignore it for a period of time. So I'm going to actually use myself as an example here. My first sign that I was in a dark night of my soul was in October of last year. So almost a little over a year ago now. And I started to notice that my thyroid nodule was getting bigger. It was visible from the outside. Something was wrong. The doctors couldn't tell me what. And I was kind of in denial. I was like, nope, there's got to be some way to fix this. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to be okay. And then by March of this year, so about 5 months later, I suddenly realized that I had done everything I possibly could besides reintroducing meat. So then I had to grapple with this guilt and all these strange feelings around eating meat again. And then after that, I had to grapple with the guilt of, what my vegan beliefs may have done to farmers and ranchers and their livelihoods. Tons of grappling, right? Then, because I was super sick, I started losing all my house cleaning jobs. And yes, I could still keep doing nutrition and personal training, but even that was getting harder and harder because meeting up with people on Zoom was getting really difficult because I was just so sick. I was so tired. I couldn't even think. I mean, I didn't even want to think, to be honest. So I said, okay, that's okay. I'm just in kind of a rough patch. I'll get through it. So again, I was still in denial, and it wasn't until June or July maybe of this year that I was trying to help my mom retire, and nothing was going right, and we both ended up just losing everything. We lost our home, our money, everything, and I turned to meditation. And what was interesting was after I started meditating, I couldn't smoke weed anymore. And that was a huge coping mechanism for me. I had been smoking weed for nearly 15 years to sleep every night, and all of a sudden, I couldn't. I tried to smoke one night and I got so paranoid. The images that were flashing through my head were so gruesome and awful that I could not sleep at all. So, I mean, total opposite. It used to help me sleep, and now it was keeping me up all night. So I had to admit something was completely off, and I had to turn to spirituality. And that's why if you look back at my YouTube videos around that time, they take a turn towards enlightenment and tapping into source consciousness, being more patient with my fellow man. There's an intuitive quality to it all of a sudden, because I had to reignite that part of myself to get through it. I'm still in it, but I'm coming out of it finally, because I've turned back to who I was. Now, why did it have to get so bad for me? And why might it have to get bad for other people? How bad it gets for you or anyone else really depends on how far from your higher self and your intuition you've gotten up until that point. So up until October of 2020, I had turned way heavily to science, the very pragmatic version of science where you don't allow for any metaphysics, you don't allow for any intuition or any gut feelings anymore. I had gotten rid of all my tarot cards because I was so focused on this idea that anybody who does anything like that is either deluding themselves or someone else. And maybe they are, maybe I am, right? But it doesn't matter, because the thing is, that had made me happy. And I'm not saying that's what you have to come back to. I'm not saying you have to learn how to infuse bread with different herbs to cure depression, okay? That is not what I'm saying, and I'm not saying that works for everyone. What I am saying, though, is if you find yourself in the dark night of the soul and it's getting really, really bad, I urge you to consider how far away from who you are deep down you've gotten. What parts of yourself have you rejected and ignored? What things have you stopped doing because there's a little voice in your head that keeps telling you, oh, that's stupid. That's so dumb. Neurodivergence especially, we have a strong tendency to turn away from ourselves. You know, neurodivergence are people with ADHD, autism, Tourette's, anybody who their brain is different than the norm. And I think we're all neurodivergent in some way, but unfortunately, society hasn't allowed for that inner diversity yet. And what I urge you to do if you're neurodivergent is, what is that inner neurotypical always criticizing you for that you've stopped letting yourself do? Because again, that voice in your head is saying, why would you do that? And you all know exactly what I mean, that person in your life that, why are you doing that? The second anybody makes this face at you, that TikTok, walk the other way, like just do that, okay? We don't need that crap in our lives. The world is in a time of awakening. So I wouldn't be surprised to find that a lot of you are going through some kind of dark night of the soul. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of you are just starting to go through it now. COVID triggered it for a lot of us. But if we can acknowledge it together and work through it together, I think we'll find connection and closeness in ways that we never have before. I think there is a way to find beauty in this experience that we're all going through right now. And if you can't find beauty, I think there's nothing wrong with accepting that as part of your dark night. I mean, like I said, Moogie got out the other day, and that was definitely part of my dark night. I was having a lot of trouble surrendering to the universe and just having faith enough to manifest anything. I was having trouble giving in to the help I was receiving. And in another moment of the dark night of my soul, the universe took Moogie. Something chased her up a rock. She didn't come back for 4 days. Actually, she still didn't come back. What was interesting was something in my gut told me to go down this old unused trail that I hadn't looked down before at like 1 or 2 in the morning. And I literally woke up at night out of a sound sleep, just wide awake, and got this message, go here, you will find Moogie. And I did. It was wild. And I couldn't have done that if I didn't surrender to the level that I did, and I couldn't have surrendered to Source the way that I did if she hadn't gotten out, because I was so desperate to find her and make sure she was safe that the only option I had left was to let go. So I'll leave you with this question. How bad is it going to have to get for you to let go? And is there a way that you can let go now before you have to go through that? I love you all, and I thank you so much for tuning in and joining me on this wild journey I've taken you all on. Until next time, remember to fall in love with the tragedy and not just the victory. And I'll see you all soon.